how do you scale responsible AI through experimentation and evaluation? I mean, basically a mechanism to turn your pilot slash experiments into business impact. And this particular presentation is primarily tailored for applied AI Summit Healthcare. It is going up live in April 2026. Little bit about me, myself, Anil Pantangi. I'm a product and technology leader in a consulting company, and I help enterprise customers and heavily regulated industries adopt and scale AI at a global scale. And also, we do so through experimentation and evaluation. And outside of that, I also serve as a chief editor at Wiley Applied AI Days and also AI track chair at IEEE Cloud Summit Industry Sectors. What do we want to get out of today's session? A lot of industry leaders and AI leaders that I talk to today is more like spray and pray, as in you ship a product or you ship a AI service and you hope and pray that it works out well. And instead of that, when you're in heavy regulated industry like healthcare, you want to be in a situation where you have a clearly defined hypothesis and able to validate that hypothesis. Right? I mean, especially in a regulated space where take an example like claim processing, or take an example like EHR record scanning. You don't want to be in a situation, oh yeah, let's throw in this model and see if it can scan well or not. There are chances that because AI is inherently probabilistic, there are chances that your model may fail or can cause reputational damage. So in today's session, I'll walk through two simple frameworks on how you can begin with crafting hypotheses and can validate them, and also how you can measure the overall utility and experience for your customers. With that said, I coined this framework called the H-scale framework, and this comes from several years of industry experience, having seen from pure ML model use cases to all the way up to AI, Gen AI, and agentic AI use cases. One of the key things that industry leaders stumble upon is, hey, we have 10 pilots across the industry, but none of them went to production. Most of the time, the reasons are not due to technology or scaling. It's actually due to what is a customer problem or what is the area that you're trying to solve for. Or when you have nailed it down, you actually came across few other regulations or policies that are stopping you. Like you might have a good feature that is working well in US, but cannot scale in Canada because that particular product is not lighted up in Canadian French, if you will. Or you have a document summary in Canada, but you're not able to enable it in Germany because German Work Council will not let you do it. So the mental model that I want all the listeners or participants to walk away today is how to carefully craft the hypothesis and learn from your pilot, evaluate, and go to production grade solutions. So the H-scale framework, basically it's an acronym for six different aspects in this framework. H stands for hypothesis, S as in signal, C criteria. I mean, you could call it a success criteria or even failure criteria. What do you define as a failure so that you don't have to move all the way down to production? And then what are some actions that you want to take? And what do you want to learn from this particular pilot or from this particular experiment? And once you learn, what do you want to evaluate? As in, do you want to pivot, persevere, or scale to the next cohort set of audience? So, what does hypothesis look like? Let's take as an example, you're working on a claims processing system and you want to bring in Gen AI, right? As in order for a claim to be processed, a customer would be submitting 3 or 4 bills, screenshots, and also the healthcare provider would be uploading another gazillion number of documents on what services that they have offered and what prescription that they have provided. So you could begin with the hypothesis that the claims processing agent would spend less time, or claim processing agent would have better clarity, or something of the sort. You don't have to worry about what that metric is going to be. Just frame it in plain, simple English. What is the hypothesis that you're going at? So let's take the claims example. The claims processing agent will spend less time in terms of serving the customer. And then once you have hypothesis, the business owner of this particular claim processing system or the function unit owner needs to understand what indicator prove it's working, right? I mean, a traditional big tech industry, you could consider them as a product manager or a BI analytics manager can provide those signals. But in the healthcare sector, I generally advocate for the business unit owner to be close to what those indicators are. Probably one could argue that An indicator could be amount of time spent on per claim, or median time spent per claim, or number of clicks to copy paste from X systems into Y source, right? As in copy data from healthcare provider to your claim system, those kind of things. So identify those things. I mean, you could begin with, for this example, you could begin with two signals. Number one is median time spent, and number two is number of swivel chairs. When I say swivel chair, as in moving from one system to another system. What does criteria look like? Okay, we've identified those signals. What does criteria look like? In our claim processing system, a criteria could be, I generally recommend to take at least two or three criteria. A couple of criteria examples could be number one, the median time spent per claim should drastically come down, probably by 10% or 15% of that sort. Because you don't want to build a whole AI and agentic AI solution jumping through so many hoops, and only medium time reduction is just 30 seconds or 40 seconds, right? So take up a goal that with an assumption that we would at least spend in 10% less amount of time. Previously, if it were taking like an hour, if you're coming down to 50 minutes, that's a good win, right? Because you could process more number. And also think of on the customer standpoint of view. While time reduction is good, you also want to combine with the quality of the output. Like let's say if customers are processing claims, but they're not in favor of customer, agents are processing claims, but not in favor of customer, or customer is continuously disputing them, then you're not in the right situation. So anchor that around customer quality as well, as in number of rebuttals is still constant. You could begin with the rebuttals is constant, or you could increase the bar of quality, saying that rebuttals could also go down. And once, as a business owner, you identify your hypothesis, signal, and criteria, then set your actions. Actions, as in smallest experiments that are possible without having to spend thousands of lives and millions of dollars on something that may or may not work, right? So define carefully what a smallest experiment look like, and create that experiment either on-prem or on cloud, whatever your ecosystem is, and have a mechanism to capture both qualitative and quantitative insights. A lot of times I've seen leaders stumble upon is they get activated with all these first four steps and then light it up only to see that, wait, what? I don't have any mechanism to capture the data for this, because since it's an experiment, I did not do my data plumbing or data orchestration, and I see that often and often. So have that data plumbing set up as well, and which could be telemetry or your web analytics data, all that stuff. And also, if possible, during your experimentation, talk to both in the claim processing example, talk to both your agent as one of your customer as well. You can ask them for feedback. What was overall their experience look like? Sometimes agent could say, hey, this is working really well. What if I could expand this to this particular additional scenario as well? Or this is working well, but I feel it's overly confident. Maybe it should give me some other indicators that it is not clear or something. And finally, once you have those insights from both qualitative and quantitative, as a product leader, you have to be in a position to take those criteria, your quantitative and qualitative insights, and decide on what next steps look like. Evaluate those insights that you have and make a recommendation. Either you want to pivot to a different solution, or you want to persevere, as in continue in the same path, or scale to the next level. So that's the head scale framework. And while we do so, like I've gone through some examples, right? The insight has to be depth. I mean, as in it cannot be on surface layer, because you got to peel the onion at least a layer or two to get into those layers. I'll walk you through what that measurement maturity curve looks like. I mean, don't stop at just are they using it, right? I mean, in that example that we just mentioned, the agents, if they're using your new claims processing system, don't stop at just adoption, right? I mean, I was working for a big enterprise customer, and the CIO and their group are sitting and going through adoption metrics at the each business unit level, which makes sense if you're in a week one or week two of your pilot. But you want to be in a situation, you also move from DAO as in daily active users, to what does business ROI looks like. That's where measuring the utility comes to place, and that's where the user's life cycle actually gets better. This is a maturity curve that I generally advocate for. Begin with usage, and then performance, and then utility. Utility as in what experiences across the spectrum. your solution is helping the customers to move the needle, and finally, business ROI. Because at the end of the day, you could delight your customer, you still have to give back to your stakeholders in terms of stakeholders and shareholders in terms of either cost to serve your customer has gone down, you are getting net new revenue, or yeah, you're adding net new healthcare providers to your insurance ecosystem. All right. Someone can argue that, hey, while this all makes sense, but sometimes some of those metrics are not easily available, which is fair, right? I mean, if you're working in a rocket science, right? I mean, ROI is definitely not easy to measure because you have to spend a decade or two to actually ship your first rocket. If you're in a research type industry, like a cancer detection research type industry, they take several years to get there. So how do we do in those type of things? Or even a simple digital product, sometimes it takes like 90 to 180 days to see the business ROI. But there could be some indicators that might tell you that are leading, will tell you, yeah, these leading indicators might provide a signal towards lagging North Star. So here are a few examples. Like one example here is um, the North Star is, let's say you are a software manager and your North Star is engineering velocity, because the push from both your business and functional leaders is let's ship more features or let's ship more delightful experiences for customer. But I'm pretty sure most of you have heard your engineering manager come back and say, oh yeah, it takes like 12 weeks to get there, or it takes 15 weeks to get there. But am I going to get ROI after that or not? So you could look at leading indicators like time spent reviewing reports, time spent reviewing defect bug triages, and how many times the Gen AI or agentic AI summary is good enough, like correction count, how many times the manager had to override, what does accept or retry rate. So let's say if you put a Gen AI summary on a claim report or an engineering manager report, and if 50% of the time managers are rejecting the Gen AI summary, then there's likely indicator that it's not going to add value because the 50% of times it's not working well and it's going to churn the managers out, and then they go to the status quo system, right? So those are some of the leading or proxy signals that you could look at in one example. And likewise, in your own industry, you can crack what those leading signals are. And this is the mental model I strongly advocate for. If you can't measure the North Star in a 2 week sprint, you need a proxy, right? I mean, within 2 week sprint, you're not able to identify what North Star indicator is moving the needle or not. You need to have those proxies. And it's tough sometimes to identify what those proxies are, but you can look at the means to end processes that you already have. Like in the claims processing example, you can look at number of jumps a process has to go through and see if those number of hoops can be brought down or time spent between the hoops can be brought down. Those could be your leading signals. And while I close out on the high scale framework, H scale framework, there's another mental model that I encourage product leaders to look for, which is called a 3F framework. This is where the utility comes into the play, as in, is your product adding value to your customer, right? But how do I know? How do I begin with? Right? I mean, a lot of times it's not encouraging to start off with a white paper. So, what I encourage leaders is begin with high scale framework, write down all of those things. At the same point of time, capture another dimensionality of 3F: flow state, friction, and feedback. Flow state as in, what does it look like if everything works well, right? As in the claim processing system, a flow state is claims agent putting their headset on, grabs a claim, loads all the data that is possible from healthcare provider or customer and all of this thing, and then clicks next, and then clearly defines a claim report and emails it to customer or mails to customer based on it. That's the flow state looks like. But what does the friction look like? Friction could be, systems can break in many fashions. Number one, they're not able to open the new claim processing system. Or number two, healthcare provider data is loadable, but customer provider data is not available on time. So they have to pick up a phone call and call the customer, and it goes to voicemail. And then that claim goes into on hold stage. You're waiting for the customer to come back. So those are some of the friction state. You have to do multiple retries, or you have to do overrides because customer was extremely upset because of their claim processing. So those are what friction state looks like. And even though in your current system you haven't already captured friction state, And I can highly guarantee that you'll have at least 5 to 10 friction state in any given workflow. The friction state is primarily an antivirus for your flow state. And finally, feedback. How does your AI system know feedback from your customer or from your claim agent? There are two fashions, right? You could get explicit feedback where your customer tells you, and customer saying that, oh yeah, my claim processing is very well, or your claims processing agent can tell you, oh yeah, this is actually reducing my spec time. You could also get implicit feedback from the friction state or from your telemetry data, as an agent is jumping randomly from one screen to another screen because they do not understand the product very well. That is also an implicit feedback. So that's what I mean by direct satisfaction scores and qualitative sentiment loop. And in a regulated industry, to begin with the pilot, I generally the metric, ultimate AI metric is 1 to 10 correction. Even 1 to 10 correction is not a high bar, but during pilot, you would want to begin with at least out of 10 times, probably one wrong entry or one retry could be a good starting point. I know that's a high bar, but think of it this way: your reputation is at risk if you're actually giving wrong claim for cardiovascular type of setup. You're claiming only approval only for $100. That may not be a right set for that type of approval. So think of those things. And you can also measure how often the human being needs to be intervened, and also look at your NPS scores and CSAT scores. And finally, before you enable your qualitative and quantitative insights, you have to make sure the governance policies are codified, especially in healthcare. There could be several governance policies, both from federal or state agents in US, but expanding it to other countries and other geos, you'll have much more complicated governance policies that needs to be codified. And also drift detection and audit trails. As in, you might have trained your AI model on one set of data, but all of a sudden you're starting to see new type of data or new volume coming in. You have to be aware of those drift that is coming in and detect them, and also tune your models and have human override controls wherever possible, so that AI is not the driver seat throughout. I mean, AI could be driver seat in some use cases, but in your high touch use cases, have you human override control. Normally, when I do it in person, I do a deep dive case study. We can skip that. Finally, the HScale framework recap, come up with hypotheses, signals, criteria, actions. How do you want to learn, and what do you want to evaluate on, and what are the next steps? Thank you so much for AI Summit. I'm open for questions. And again, myself, Anil Pantangi. You can find me on LinkedIn, or you can post questions here. Thank you.